What is cyanotype and how can you get started with this fabulous art form? Well, in this video, I'm going to teach you everything that you need to know to get started with cyanotypes. By the end of this tutorial, you'll know exactly what supplies you need, how to use them, and how to create beautiful cyanotype prints. Hi, I'm Jenna McLean. I'm a printmaker. I do gel printing, block printing, silk screen, and other forms of printing. And my goal with this channel is to help you get into printing as an art form and to develop your skills. So let's get going. What is cyanotype? Well, it's photography without a camera. It was invented in 1842 by British astronomer and mathematician and chemist Sir John Herschel. He figured out that if you took a mixture of these two chemicals and put them together, that they would be sensitive to the ultraviolet light of the sun. The ultraviolet light of the sun triggers a chemical reaction in any kind of surface that has been coated with the solution. So you can cyanotype on paper, fabric, wood. You could even cyanotype on ceramics that have not been fired or glazed. And it turns this amazing shade of blue. And here is a cyanotype I did with this exact piece of seaweed. What you do is you take an object, you could put your keys, a hairbrush, a photographic negative, a feather, anything on top of this paper. You take it outside, and as soon as the sun's light starts to hit the paper, a chemical reaction starts to take place. But this reaction can only take place in the areas where the light is hitting the paper. Areas of the paper that are being blocked by whatever you've put on there, they don't go through that chemical reaction. So while you're outside, the paper does not turn this amazing shade of blue. It's going to turn colors, but it's not going to look like this. After you've been outside for a certain amount of time, you come back in, you remove your object from the paper, you put it in a water bath. And the purpose of the water bath is twofold. One is to finish the chemical reaction, to stop it. And when it goes into the water bath, that's when it starts to turn this color blue. And also when you put it in the water bath, the areas that were blocked by whatever you had on there, it washes the cyanotype solution out of those areas. And then you start to get this beautiful white look. This is a cyanotype that I made with this exact same piece of seaweed. And you can see the kind of really fun effects that you get with this. So if you're ready to learn everything that you need to know about how to get started with cyanotypes, let's dive in. Okay, let's get you started with your first cyanotypes. Here are the supplies that you're going to need, and I'll explain why you need them as we go along in this part of the video. Also, if you wait till the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can get my free supply list. It has all of the links to the supplies that you'll need, and also a complete set of instructions about how to prepare your papers and how to go outside and how to wash everything off. And so there's a complete step-by-step guide as to what you have to do. So first, you need to purchase cyanotype solution. And I use this set from a company called Jacquard. There are other companies that sell similar products, but they are more expensive. Now, at the time I'm recording this, the Jacquard set that you see is about $15 in the United States. And I realize that in Europe and other parts of the world, art supplies can be a lot more expensive than they are here. And also, I don't know if this Jacquard brand is available outside of the United States. So if you're in another country, I just recommend that you Google cyanotype supplies and see what comes up. When you order this, it should come as a set of 2 bottles, part A and part B. Both of them should be together in the same set. You also need paper, and it has to be sturdy enough to go into a water bath without falling apart. This means that copy paper or anything really thin won't work. I use watercolor paper or special printmaking paper for cyanotypes. If you're just getting started, go with watercolor paper. Avoid really cheap student-grade watercolor papers though, because they may not absorb the chemicals properly and they may fall apart if you put them in a water bath. There are 2 basic kinds of watercolor paper. There is something called cold press paper and something called hot press paper. If you're a watercolor artist, you already know this, but if you've never done watercolors, I'll explain it. Here is a watercolor pad, and you can see right here, it says cold press. Here's another pad that I have from a different company. It says cold press. You should see this on the front of the packet, or if you're buying this online, you'll see it. It'll tell you whether it's cold press or hot press. At this particular moment in time, all I happen to have is cold press paper. I don't have any hot press. What's the difference? Well, hot press watercolor paper has a completely smooth surface. It has no depressions. Cold press paper, on the other hand, has those little depressions, those little dips in the paper. Some people who do cyanotypes like to use hot press paper because it is completely smooth, and they feel that they can get more detail that way. But I did this on cold press watercolor paper, and I got a lot of details. So if all you happen to have around the house is cold press water paper, you can definitely use it. Cyanotype solution is a mild irritant. So if you do this without gloves, you probably will not have any problems, but to be on the safe side, you may just want to have a pair of latex gloves around. Another thing that you're going to need is a little cup. I got some takeout food in this, a Sharpie, a bowl. Some takeout food came in this, so just some old junky bowl that you don't care about anymore, because once you start using this for cyanotype solution, you're not going to want to use it for anything else. You're going to want to protect the surface that you're working on when you're coating the paper with something. I happen to have a beat up old tablecloth here that I don't care about anymore. Also, I put down newspapers, and I reuse them. I save them after I coat the paper, and just to keep our landfills a little bit emptier, I reuse these papers. You're going to need a plastic basin for soaking the cyanotype. I actually like to use 2, and I'll explain why later. You need to put the cyanotype paper on something when you take it outside. Now this happens to be an old picture frame that I found in the trash. Somebody in my building was throwing it out. And you have a piece of glass here. The purpose of that is to hold down things that are lightweight. And I also recommend that you have some beat up old tea towels or pieces of fabric or felt. You're going to use that to put the paper on. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in a few minutes. You're going to need some binder clips to hold the glass onto the backing, whatever backing you decide to use. And I bought this gizmo at my local dollar store, and it's really handy. When I come back inside, when I wash my prints off, to let them dry, I hang this up and I clip my prints onto this. So you need something, a clothesline, clothespins. You could use binder clips, something to hold up your wet prints over a sink or over a tub so that the water can drip out of them and they can dry off. You're also going to need a black plastic bag for putting your coated papers in to protect them from the light. It doesn't have to be a fancy black plastic bag. There are bags made for photography, but you could just use a regular old black garbage bag. That's fine. When you get your cyanotype solution, there is powder at the bottom of each one of these bottles. You open up each bottle, you fill them to the top with water, you shake them, and then you let them sit for 24 hours. And then you can start the process of coating your papers. Before you start to coat your paper with this solution, there are a couple of things that you have to keep in mind. First of all, you cannot do this in a room that has a lot of sunlight streaming in. It has to be done in a fairly dark or subdued lighting situation. So you can coat your papers at night, you could do it real early in the morning before the sun comes up, or you can do it during the day in your place, as long as you're not in a room that is full of sunlight pouring through the windows. I do not coat my papers here where I am filming this video because there's a window right over there. I go to another spot in my place that is really dark, and that's where I coat my papers. My windows face the west, so in the afternoon I get a lot of sunlight in my place. So when I coat papers, I always do it in the morning, and I do it in this area that is very, very dim. As far as lighting goes, LED lights are okay, regular incandescent light bulbs are fine, fluorescent lights are fine. If you have that kind of lighting shining in the area where you're working, you're fine. It's the ultraviolet light of the sun that starts to trigger this chemical reaction and starts turning the paper different colors. So as long as you're away from UV light, you're good to go. Now, I've heard that halogen lights can sometimes mess around with this solution, so I would avoid coating the paper in an area with halogen lighting. Another thing that you want to keep in mind is that this stuff stains. It's not going to come out of your clothes, nor is it going to come out of upholstery. So don't wear nice clothes, and don't do this near a rug or curtains or your sofa or anything that's upholstered, because if this solution gets into it, it's not coming out. When I start coating my papers, I put down this old tablecloth, and then I take newsprint and I lay it on top of the tablecloth. Now, you can see this is the solution that is sitting on this paper from previous coating sessions. Do you see what I mean about it staining? You definitely don't want this in any fabric that's of value to you. Now, this comes from a newspaper pad. It's unprinted newspaper. You can buy unprinted newspaper pads at an art supply store, but you definitely don't need to buy that. I just happen to have it around. And definitely use newspapers. So I put paper down on top of fabric to protect my surface, and then I start coating my papers. I also, before I get going, I'll take some of these newspaper sheets and I'll place them all over the floor. So as I coat a piece of paper here, when it's coated, I go and I put it on top of some newspaper so that it can dry on something that's protecting my floor. So put on your latex gloves, grab this bowl, grab your little cup and your solution, and we're going to mix this up. We're going to take equal parts of part A and part B and put them in the cup and then put them in the bowl. But before I start that, I just want to show you something. A little bit of this goes a very, very long way. You do not need to mix up a lot of solution to coat a lot of paper. I put this mark here on this cup, and I took this much from part A and part B and mix them together, and I was able to coat 13 sheets of watercolor paper. I'm talking about sheets of paper that are 11 by 15 inches. That's a lot of paper. This stuff goes a really long way. This kit is going to last you forever. So before you even start mixing up solution, you need to think about this, because you don't want to fill up this cup to the top with part A and fill it to the top with part B, because you'll be coating papers for the next 2 hours and you may not have a chance to actually use them in the time that you need to use them. And I'm going to discuss that in just a second. So I put this mark here and I wrote the number 13 next to it, because I know that if I fill this cup up to this level with this and then with this, I can coat about 13 sheets of paper. I took out my Sharpie, because I only want to do a few today. I want to do maybe about 7. I'm going to fill this up to this line here with part A and then with part B, and then I'm going to start to coat papers. So let's take some part A, dump it in there, and you can see that it has a very gold look to it. And now I'm going to take some part B. I'm going to go to that same line. This has more of a greenish color to it. Put it in there. And then just mix it up a little like this. Once you mix both of these parts together, you really need to use it up today. It's chemically unstable after a couple of hours, and this chemical solution will start to break down. So when you're planning your paper coating session, you need to have enough paper at hand and be prepared to coat all of it in one session. Once the paper is coated, you have to use it within a fairly short period of time. A week is best, but sometimes the papers will last longer than that, maybe a month. So before you even start coating your papers, you need to think about your schedule for the upcoming week. I also look at the weather report. For instance, if you're going on vacation in 48 hours and you say, well, before I go, I'm going to coat some papers and I'll cyanotype when I come back in 3 weeks, that's not going to work, because by the time you come back, the papers are probably not going to be that good. So keep this in mind before you even start this paper coating process. Now, there is a way to create cyanotypes indoors with an ultraviolet light. So if you're in an area where there are weeks of rain and fog, you can still do cyanotypes. And I'm going to be doing another separate video on how to do this indoors, so keep your eyes open for that video. Also, some of you may live in an apartment or in a city environment where going outside isn't always practical. And you just can't go outside and leave something sitting on a sidewalk for a while it develops. Or some of you may want to do cyanotypes at night after work when the kids are asleep. So keep your eyes open, because I am going to be doing another video about how to do this indoors, and so that you could do this 365 days a year. What some people do, if they don't want to whip up a lot of solution, they will use eyedroppers and pull out drops from this bottle and drops from that bottle and mix it together. So if you don't have a lot of time to cyanotype and you don't want to be coating lots of paper, you can get some droppers and just measure it out that way. However, you have to be careful with this. Make sure that you put tape on this and say this particular dropper is for part A and this particular dropper is for part B, because you don't want to go in to this and contaminate it with the same dropper that you use for part A. So that's just another tip for doing small amounts of cyanotypes. So I'm going to coat this paper, and I just dip my foam brush in here and just spread it out. You can do this with a paintbrush, the kind that has bristles. I've done that, but I have found that brushes tend to pull up too much of this liquid, and you've got liquid sloshing all over the place, which you don't want. You don't want to have pools of this liquid sitting on here. You also only need to do one coat of this solution on this paper. And as you can see, it's going on in a golden color with a little bit of green in it. So that's the kind of look that you can expect. And now that I have this coated, I walk over to the area where the newspaper is, I lay it on top, and I let it dry. Now, how long is it going to take to dry? It depends on the heat and humidity in your area. I have found that it takes about a half an hour for this to dry, and it's drying in an area of my place that is very dark. And then when it's done, when all of your papers are done, that's when you pull out your black plastic bag and put them in there. Then take the black plastic bag and put it in a place that's also not going to get a lot of light. It could be a closet, it could be a drawer. Make sure that it's not near a lot of heat and it's not getting a lot of humidity, because that can affect the paper. You probably will not get good results with your paper if it's been exposed to too much heat and humidity while it's in the black plastic bag. Let's start making some cyanotype prints. Here is some paper that I coated earlier. I think I'm going to cut it down a little bit. Some people like to cut their paper into smaller pieces before they coat it. You could do that either way. What I'm going to do before I start putting objects on top of here, I'm going to take these old pieces of fabric and put them underneath the paper. The reason that I'm putting the fabric underneath the paper is that I'm trying to lift the paper up and get it as tightly connected to the glass as possible. So I'm going to put the paper here. And now I'm going to start laying some botanicals on here. As the year progresses, I'm always going outside. I'm looking for interesting botanicals. I press them and I keep them in a folder. So some of these things I'm putting on here I've had for years. This composition part that I'm doing right now, you should do this indoors. So you can see it takes a minute or two to figure out what you're doing. Here's a hydrangea leaf. I have no idea what this is. I've got some bird feathers in here. Now I'm going to take the piece of glass and set it on top. I'm going to take my binder clips and I'm going to clip everything together. You don't want the binder clip though to be on top of the paper because then you'll get an imprint on it. And now's a good time to put on a watch or have something around to keep time with, because we're going to go outside and expose this. But before we do that, I'm going to take my 2 basins, I'm going to put some water in them, and I'm going to put them right here so that as soon as I come back in from outside, I can put this paper right in the water bath. I have my 2 water baths here. There's not a lot of water in this. I think I've got about 2 inches of water in each one. I do this before I go outside because the water is going to be what stops the chemical reaction from continuing on. Even when you walk back in from outside, you've started this chemical reaction by letting the sun hit the paper. So as you're still walking back inside, that chemical reaction is still taking place and it's going to stop when you put it in the water. So that's why I do this first. Okay, let's go outside. Okay, I've just come outside. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's a little bit breezy, which is one of the reasons that you have the glass down there. I'm going to look at my watch. It is 20 after 1. I'm taping this in early September. And from experience, I know that this is not going to take that long. It should maybe only take about 5 to 7 minutes. I'm hoping that my camera on my phone is capturing the color change. You can see the paper. It was yellowish gold before we came outside. Now it's starting to turn a bit more blue. But if you look down at the bottom near the feather, you can start to see some white spots building up there. This is the time to be really observant and to watch what's going on with your paper. This is not the time to go and smoke a cigarette or get on the phone and have a conversation with somebody. Pay very close attention to what's going on because the color of this paper is going to change while we're out here. It's going to switch from this blue to like a silvery gray, and then you're going to start to see some like bronzy kind of colors showing up. And when you see that, then it's time to go inside and dip this in the water. How long is this going to take where you live? Well, it really depends on your latitude and longitude. I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and it's early September right now, and it's the early afternoon, so this is not going to take too long. If I were out here in December, late afternoon, with partially cloudy skies, it'd be a different situation. I can see the blue starting to fade. It's starting to turn that color gray that I was referring to. Again, down by the feather, you could see more whiteness showing up. That's typical. And one of the best things that I can recommend is that when you do this, keep a journal as to what day it was that you went outside, what the weather conditions were like, what time of day you went outside. I document all this stuff because you're going to start to realize that there are patterns. You're going to realize how long you need to be out here during different times of the year. The blue is starting to fade. Been out here for less than about 4 minutes. The paper is turning very gray, very pale silvery gray. Exactly at the 5-minute mark, this paper is now gray. If you're doing this in the dead of winter or in a place where the sunlight is not strong, it may take hours. And the heat of the sun has nothing to do with this. It's just the ultraviolet light. It's better to overexpose this than to underexpose it. And this is just something that takes practice. I'm at the 7-minute mark right now. I think this is ready to go back inside. So I'll see you inside. Well, we'll put this in the water bath. I'm back inside and this chemical reaction is still going. So we need to take off the binder clips and get this in the water bath. You can see the areas that were hidden by the leaves. Oh, that feather came out really well. Okay, I'm going to drop this in the first water bath over here. And what you want to do with it is just rock it side to side, back and forth a little bit. You're going to leave it in here for a few minutes. The water is going to start to change color. I don't know how well you can see it. It's starting to look a little bit yellow. That's because the cyanotype solution is washing out of these areas. You can also flip it over. Some people just want to do this in one water bath. I like to do it in two. I like to get the solution washed out of these areas here and move it over here to give it another hit with some really clean fresh water. And so you can see that beautiful indigo Prussian blue showing up. The water is stopping the chemical reaction from taking place. But that said, what's going to happen is while this is drying, the color can still change, and you might start to see some purpley pinky colors showing up in some of these white areas. So even though the chemical reaction has stopped, the color still changes a little bit. Okay, let's see how we do here. So here is that gizmo. It's hanging above my kitchen sink. It's suspended to a shelf. And I put the print there. I'm going to let it dry. How long is that going to take? It could be maybe an hour. And the colors can get more blue and intense, as I just mentioned, as this drying process goes on. Take a look at these two cyanotypes here and see what you notice. This cyanotype here is that deep indigo blue, and it's uniform. There aren't any changes in the shade. It's pretty much the same shade of blue throughout. But if you look at this one, my goodness, we've got all different shades of blue, and we've got yellow splotches, and we have little round bubbly looking things here. What's going on? Well, there are two kinds of cyanotypes, wet and dry. The one I just showed you outdoors is called a dry cyanotype. That's because we took a piece of paper, we put objects on top, we put the glass on top, that was it. But this is called a wet cyanotype, and it operates in the same way. You take your paper, you put the objects on top of it, but then before you put the glass down, you start having some fun with it. You hit it with vinegar, you spritz it with vinegar. You can spritz it with baking soda solution. This golden colored here came from dumping the spice turmeric on top of it. I don't know if you can see this on the camera. There are these little round circles here. That was caused by dumping dish detergent bubbles on top of the paper. So this is a wet cyanotype. You get some really funky looks with this. You don't get the crisp definition that you get with the dry cyanotype, but you can get some really crazy effects that are really artistic and a lot of fun. And I'm going to be doing videos about how to do wet cyanotypes in the future. So subscribe to this channel if you want to be notified when those videos come out. And if you like this video, it would be great if you can give me a thumbs up. If you want to get a copy of my free supply list that contains links to everything that I showed you today, where to purchase it, and also a complete list of instructions from start to finish about how to set up your work area and what to do in what order, just look below this video in the description. There is a link to my free supply and instruction list. Just click on it and it will be sent to you right away. If you want to learn more about cyanotypes, keep your eyes on this channel because I'm going to be creating a lot more videos over the next few months in which I explain some of these other techniques. If you have old family photographs, especially if you have the negatives, you can use them for cyanotype. You can cyanotype on tote bags and on t-shirts, bolts of fabric, bed linens, you name it. So I will be doing all of that and more. So please subscribe, and I hope you enjoyed this tutorial.